are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. I am Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool. And today we are talking about the biggest takeaways from the 2021 season for the Dallas Cowboys. But before we do that, Landon, are you feeling any better, less depressed now that we're a couple days removed from the game?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm not, eating ice cream while watching sad movies anymore, or any of that level of depressed. But I'm still upset. I mean, it's still sad and upsetting that they had an opportunity with a team like that, and we're kind of able to get through it. And maybe that's part of my biggest takeaway. We'll talk about that in a sec. But just disappointment is part. Honestly, it's not. People want to believe it's part of being a Cowboys fan in general. It's honestly a part of being an NFL football fan in general. It's a zero-sum game. Only one team wins the Super Bowl. And unless you've lived in the Northeast for the last decade and a half, you haven't experienced a lot of victory for a very extended period of time.
True story. I went and watched the Steelers-Chief game after the Cowboys 49er game at a friend's house. And I came back home and my wife was in bed. And I crawled into bed. And she just kind of mumbled as she was sleeping, "Did the Steelers lose?" I said, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh, that's nice for you then." Like, that's it. That's all I got. That's
a good wife right there. It's like, at least understands the mission, right?
Yeah, she made cookies on Monday because she could tell that I was just like not happy. So that helped. I'm still very depressed about it. But all right, let's get to the biggest takeaways. I've got some good ones, some positive ones, and I've got some negative ones. So let's start with you, Landon. What's your biggest takeaway from the season?
The biggest takeaway from this, for me, or one of the biggest takeaways from the season, is that what you have at the beginning of the season is not always what you're going to get at the end of the season. And I think we knew that, obviously, going in, and I think that we always feel like it's like, I mean, we compare it to Madden all the time because we're all of that age, right? But it's not like Madden where there's just constant progression of getting better.
It's not a linear progression as the season goes on, right?
I think that in some ways we experienced some of that, right? I feel like in terms of the secondary and the development and some of the corners, like, you did see that kind of progression go as guys got better and better. And I think in some other spots as well. But I do think that some of the areas where we expected that were good, some of the specific aspects of the team that were good early in the season, and we kind of just expected to be at least that good, if not better, moving forward. They regressed a little bit. I mean, specifically in the offensive line, I would say the wide receiver core, I think, struggled as we get down the stretch. So I think that one of the biggest takeaways there is that progression is obviously, we know that progression is not always assured, but beyond that, regression is a thing that can very well happen, in the middle of the season.
Do you think the lack of beating good opponents in the early to middle part of the season affected them? Like, do you think they just weren't battle tested enough?
I don't know. I mean, I think they would have lost, to really good teams if I don't think the fact that they didn't play good teams is the issue. I think the issue is that they themselves took several steps back and I think messed with their own mojo at certain points.
But all right, so let me rephrase like this: if they were, what was the best record they were at one point? Were they 8-1, something like that?
Yeah, like 6-2. Wasn't there? I mean,
maybe 7-2 or something like that. Whatever.
6-2 going to the bye.
If they would have been, let's say, 7-5 at one point during the season, or 7-6, and you played a lot of good teams and you lost, do you think there would have been some urgency to correct some of the things that maybe were going wrong? Or because my gut feeling was they got a little complacent when they just kept winning games. And it's like, hey, we can keep messing with our offensive line. We can keep doing this, and this. I just wonder if that factored in.
I mean, I can speak to what my own internal narrative of this team was hoping would be, is that, they got a bunch of wins up front. They they had some injuries, they dealt with the COVID situation. They kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit to make sure that they got to the playoff scenario healthy. And then my thought was that once they got into the playoffs, that they would, kind of revert back to what we saw in the early the season. No reason to hold anything back, no reason to kind of hold it back at all, put the foot to the pedal. But that didn't happen at all. I mean, that's why my tone has changed so much in just the last week, right? Yeah. Is because it was all based on the idea that, okay, they're trying to, I don't know that I like this idea if this was the strategy, but they're trying to get to the playoffs with the idea that once we get healthy, we got everyone in the playoffs. Now it's time to put the pedal to the metal and go full bore against these teams. But that never happened. That never arrived. We never really saw that. So I don't know that, I think there's something to what you're saying. The idea that, like, if they had to claw back against difficult teams and had more difficult situations that kind of made them more battle tested, maybe they I don't know, they have that level of toughness that's required to kind of counterpunch when San Francisco
I look at
punches
like
them
what happened to the 49ers this year. Like, they had to scrap and claw to get to the playoffs. It came down to week 18 and they played the best division in the NFL, right? And their record says they were 9-8, but how many big games did they play in all season long, whether it was against the Packers or within the division? And it just felt like they were ready for that moment a little bit more than Dallas was. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I don't know if it's, and I guess what I don't know is how to parse whether that's because they are battle tested or because, unlike the Cowboys, they had a couple, 2 or 3 things in their offense that they could, consistently rely on, And I mean, you want to call it an identity or whatever. I just I think
staples. They have some staples.
Yeah, staples of their offense that they could rely on, that they know could work, and that could help Bowie when they had injuries and that sort of thing. So, I think it's difficult to parse between those two things, but maybe they're related. Maybe you find your identity by playing difficult teams and realizing what it is that you rely on, and maybe those things are not mutually exclusive.
All right, I'm going to give my biggest takeaway from the 2021 season. But before we do that, let's tell you guys about Built Bar. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. If yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes just like a candy bar, or maybe even better than a candy bar. Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate with only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. There's so many great flavors to choose from: coconut almond, peanut butter brownie, raspberry cookies and cream, salted caramel mint brownie, and so many more. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and you'll get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right. My biggest takeaway is that Dak Prescott is still really good. And why that's a takeaway is I want people to remember what we were talking about here in May, June, July. We just didn't know how healthy he would be coming back from that ankle injury, right? Even Landon, going into training camp, the preseason, and at the very beginning of the year, the Cowboys weren't even favored to win this division. Like, Washington was the favorite to win this division. Yeah, and I remember you talking to me about the crossover shows that you did with the rest of the NFC hosts, and it was, wow, how healthy is Dak Prescott? Is he ever going to be the same quarterback? And I mean, it's kind of funny to look back on it now and say, oh yeah, that's, it's whatever. That's just the rest of the NFC East hating on Dallas. But there was some real concerns that this was going to be an injury that completely changed Dak. Now, is he as good as he was in 2019 at the start of 2020? I think we could have some argument and debate about that, but he's still a ridiculously good quarterback. And I do think that's a big win and a big takeaway from the season is, Dak is still healthy and still really good.
Yeah, I mean, it's weird that it's funny because I actually had considered putting this on my list as well, but I mean, it is something that we're going to have to kind of circle back to. It's like, I mean, obviously because of what happened, and look, I mean, this has been brought upon himself. I mean, this is what's going to happen when you play like that in playoff games. The inevitable can he win a playoff game conversation starts happening. The Tony Romo treatment starts happening. I mean, I can't wait, all these folks that I can't wait for 10 years from now, when all these folks that are tweeting about whether Dak is a good enough quarterback, talk about how much they wish that they had Dak back now that he's doing broadcast games for Netflix or whoever is the new stream.
Amazon Prime. Yep.
NFL games. I think that, we've been banging the table on this through the whole cycle, the whole life cycle of supporting a quarterback, from he's too injured to play to he's too incredible. Like, I can't believe how good he is, to this guy's a bum. We can't win with him, all the way back. Like, the full cycle of Dak love and hate we've been through and been pretty consistent that Dak's a definitely top 10 quarterback, at times plays like a top 5 quarterback. He's definitely good enough to win you a Super Bowl as a player. I think the question now becomes, what do we need to do to kind of get the rest of this team and get the rest of the group at a spot where it needs to be in order to win that? I think there's going to be a lot of arguments about, Dak had plenty of talent around him, blah, 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 blah. I mean, I think if you go back and watch the games, like, there was just too many times when he couldn't rely on that talent. For as talented as this group is, and maybe that's my next takeaway, right, is that for as talented as the pieces were on offense, there were very few consistently great pieces on offense throughout the season. There were very few reliably throughout the season good pieces that that could be kind of stable. And players have up and down games, but it felt like the variance that you got in the performance of this offense, individually and as a collective throughout the season, was just all over the place. And it didn't necessarily seem to be fully based on who they were facing on defense. I mean, I think that obviously the Denver game was an exception there, and they struggled against a good San Francisco defense, but there were definitely times when they would struggle against teams that had backups in or a ton of injuries while they were dealing with. And then there were times when they were playing the full rosters and chunking teams that were really good. So it's just, it became very difficult to kind of predict week to week, especially in the last half of the season. It became very difficult week to week to try to pick where you are on the roller coaster ride with this offense.
This is going to sound crazy, but I almost wonder if they had too many weapons, right?
Yeah,
when
maybe.
you have, it's like a basketball team. If you have too many good players, you end up trying to do too much, right? And you can't get all those guys into a rhythm. Where you see some of these other offenses, Green Bay, they have one alpha receiver in Devontae Adams who gets fed every single week. And then the other guys are the ones that are splitting the touches, right? They're going to get the leftovers. But when you have Amari, CD, Gallup, Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard, I think you're always trying to, get the ball, evenly distribute the touches. Sometimes I wonder if that does make you a little bit more inconsistent week to week.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and also, it's like you wonder how much of the offense was about trying to over leverage Dak's ability to get through progressions, as opposed to just giving him, easy layups, right? Yeah. And just, okay, this one's going to Cooper. We're running a clear out route. He's running underneath. Throw the ball to Cooper.
Actually, I think some of their best offensive performances are where they made it a point to get the ball to Amari early on. Like, remember when, I think this was at the end of the season when Amari was complaining about touches, and I actually think they were a little bit better on offense in some of those games.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think, and I don't know that that's about Amari. I think that's about the fact that they were just focused on running simple plays to get the ball to their playmakers and let their playmakers win. It's like, the problem to me is just that, like, they just felt like, they had all this talent in the wide receiver position and pass catcher position. And the way that they wanted to avail themselves of it was to try to have everybody go out into route and then just see who wins. And then we'll just go to whoever wins. The problem with that is that defenses can, do a lot to kind of dictate your progression. They can do a lot to kind of mess with your timing. It just leaves a lot of room for error, especially if you're not getting the kind of blocking that you need to kind of go through all those progressions. So and again, I hate to keep harping on this, but if they had, 2 or 3 plays that they knew that they could run that would get the ball to CeeDee Lamb, or 2 or 3 plays that they knew that they could run that would clear things out versus, certain coverages for Cooper to get the ball on the move running, right? A running ball.
Mhm.
I think that the offense would have gone a lot further and would have, and then build your constraints off those, right? Like that's what the good offensive coordinators do. They find 1 or 2 things that they know can work, at least give you solid results consistently, and then they build constraints and they layer, the things that make you, when you hone on those plays, the things that they can cut you with, the counter punches to those plays. But the Cowboys don't. I mean, they don't really have that. They have, like someone else said, a collection of plays, and they have 2 or 3 counter punches, but it should all be flowing into each other. Like there should, every play should have a counter punch and then a counter punch, their counter punch, and it feels like some plays have counter punches, but there's just not enough of it. It's not enough of a cohesive, complete system as opposed to a collection of cool plays that they run.
I agree. Just back to Dak really quickly before we move on. The reason why I'm maybe a little bit less down on this team futures prospects than you are, but one of the reasons I think they're still going to be okay is because they have Dak, and in the basically every season that Dak has started, at least 16 games, they've won 8 or more. Like they've been at 500 or better, and when you have a good quarterback, you're going to be competitive. And listen, I have absolutely no doubt there's going to be a year in Dak's career where they have less talent and he just plays really well and they win a playoff game or 2. Like it's going to happen. This team is clearly more talented than any that we've seen over the last 5 or 6 years. It's just, that's kind of the nature of when you have a good quarterback, is they're going to eventually win you some games that you probably shouldn't, because that's just what elite quarterbacks do. So I still feel good about them long-term.
Yeah, I guess, my whole thing is that they need to find simple plays for Dak to play. I think that they spent too much time trying to press the easy button on offense by running the football. Yeah. They need to find easy plays for Dak to complete that don't require him to, be perfect to complete.
And maybe this offseason with kind of Ezekiel Elliott's decline, maybe that's a more of a focus, right? Maybe now they can say, hey, we can't just rely on Zeke to carry the ball 25 times a game, and then we're going to just play smash mouth football. We can't do that. We've got to find ways to consistently move the ball with ease. Maybe that'll be an offseason goal for the Cowboys. We'll see.
It should be, for sure.
Could be. All right, one more quick break to tell you guys about BetOnline. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs. BetOnline remains the #1 spot for all the sports wagering action for 2022. It's a new year and a new updated desktop and mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use promo code LOCKEDON to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, I've got one more takeaway. Do you have any more?
Yeah, I got one more.
Okay, go ahead.
My positive one, right? So the Cowboys are consistently a good drafting team, and it's time to have a little bit of faith there. I think that, if this season has shown us anything, is that were able to bring in a bunch of these defensive players and play a whole bunch of them early and get really good snaps from those guys. Obviously we don't even need to mention Parsons, but Odigizua in the first half of the season, he had Golson was able to come and give you snap. Kelvin Joseph looks like he's going to be a starter next year with the way he played. They just were able to kind of get all these guys in and get some production out of the first 3 rounds of guys. And then you like what you've got from some of the down roster guys and Jabril Cox. We'll see what we have with Fehoko and some of the other guys. I think that, going back and kind of looking, and I know that there's a belief that no one can consistently draft well or that no one drafts well. I don't necessarily believe that. Like, I think that there are teams that have advantages over other teams in the ability to draft. And I think that's why you pay GMs and have these scouting departments, is because there is a difference between you. Maybe you can't consistently rely on that for full time, but I think, there's things like when we drafted Micah Parsons, Jerry Jones, and I'm sure everybody remembers this, but no one talks about this.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry Jones immediately came out and said the reason we like Micah Parsons is his potential as a pressure player, and everybody laughed at Jerry Jones for that at the time. I mean, that's because everyone's like, that's not going to happen. They're not going to do that. No. There was never a mea culpa by anyone in the media later after Parsons became who Parsons was. I mean, there was a mea culpa that I was wrong about Parsons, but what there wasn't was an identification that the Cowboys identified what they wanted to do with Parsons early and had a plan for it, and then they put it into place in training camp. I mean, I watched it. I watched them roll it out through training camp. And they did it from day one. They had it as their original plan there. And I think that it's time for us to kind of recognize that, it's Will McClay. I'm not saying Jerry's in there making these choices, but it's time to recognize that the Cowboys have a good plan with a lot of these players and do a good job of developing the players.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of my same takeaway. So we'll just kind of combine it. For me, it's Micah Parsons is kind of a unicorn, right? And I think they have 4 studs on defense, and typically that's kind of the number you need to have a consistently good defense year to year. You're going to fluctuate in terms of turnovers. The Cowboys are certainly going to regress there next year, but when you have 4 stars, your defense is always going to be pretty good. And I'm including DeMarcus Lawrence, Randy Gregory, Micah Parsons, and Trevon Diggs. And I know some of those players have warts, but I think all of those guys are Pro Bowl caliber guys every single year. Randy Gregory is obviously a free agent. Would you be shocked if he's let me rephrase this. I would be shocked if he's not back with the team next year.
Randy Gregory?
Yeah.
I would be too. I think that they find a way to retain him.
So having 4 of those guys on defense, 3 of them which are in your front 7, makes me feel pretty good that they're going to be able to figure things out on defense, despite so many free agents being out there this year.
Yeah, defense is definitely difficult to replicate, but when you have good players and good pressure players, that process becomes a lot easier to replicate, right? Because even if you can't use the same formula as you did in the previous years, the fact that you have 3 players who can provide pressure, that's universal currency in a defense. So that will be valuable.
And it feels like Micah Parsons is already in this tier of like Von Miller early in his career, or Myles Garrett, where it's just like, this is going to be a dominant guy that defenses have to worry about every single snap. And when you have that guy on your team, you're going to have a chance to get stops no matter who your offense, what offense you're going against. So that's a takeaway, because we were going into the season not really knowing, like, okay, is Randy Gregory going to become the full-time starter because he's never even played 1,000 career snaps before that? Is Trevon Diggs going to be able to stay healthy? What does he look like in year 2? Like, we had a lot of questions about this defense, and now going into 2022, you say we have 4 bona fide studs on defense, 5 or 6 other players that you feel really, really good about. It's not going to be all that hard to talk yourself into this defense being really good again next year, no matter who's your defensive coordinator, whether it's Dan Quinn, probably not, whether it's George Edwards, whether it's Vic Fangio or Mike Zimmer. I think they're going to be okay regardless of who's calling plays back there.
Yeah, I agree. It's like I said, defense, and we've talked about this before, defense is incredibly difficult to replicate year to year. But the fact that you have, the way that you do it is to kind of retain star players, retain guys specifically that are pressure players. So I think that is a good sign for, no matter who the defensive coordinator is next year, you're going to have a good starting point, to say the least, in those 3 guys. And then I think in the secondary, you've got all your secondary guys basically coming back. And really, that kind of solids up your pass defense a little bit, or at least you have a good starting point on your pass defense, and then the rest can really be fixed by shuffling pieces, free agency, and the draft.
I just want to say, for the record, both of my takeaways are positive in this one. So for all you people out there that don't think I'm a positive person, there you go.
I was just gonna say, I hate the framing that I'm the pessimist here. I don't know that I necessarily believe that. I'm not down on the team's future. It's more just that this was a real opportunity.
Oh, yeah.
They may not get this opportunity again, so, or at least for a while.
I have a lot of different thoughts, because I completely agree with you. We talked about this on Monday and Tuesday. Like, it really felt like this was the best year that they're going to have over the next few years to win a Super Bowl. Like, in terms of percentages, let's say it was a 20% shot to win it once you got into the playoffs. you're probably not going to have a season with better odds or better chances. However, I kind of have to keep thinking back to where we were at in July and August, where we hope we win the division. It'd be nice to get in the playoffs, but this is still kind of a rebuilding team in year 2 of Mike McCarthy. And maybe rebuilding is the wrong word, but there was a lot of questions about this team going into the season. I think the first 2 months of this year kind of spoiled us, and maybe we got a little bit too optimistic about this team. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, look, I go back and watch those games, and I see why we were optimistic, but they didn't maintain that level of play, and I think that we assumed that they would. So, I think that there is going to be plenty of chances. Look, you don't need the kind of opportunity the Cowboys had this year in order to win the Super Bowl.
No,
there's a lot. You can do it with a beat up team that struggled to get into the playoffs. You can do it with the first seed. It can be done a lot of different ways. I just feel like, as far as where the team was health wise and talent wise going into the playoffs,
this game ever.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's really tough. Now, I will say this: the NFC slate of playoff teams this year, top to bottom, was, as good as it's been in a while. I would say,
and maybe that's why I'm not quite as down on this team, Landon. Is because Buccaneers are relying on a 44-year-old Tom Brady. The Rams have no draft picks and no cap space. We'll see about Aaron Rodgers. These teams could fall off quickly.
Yeah, and the NFL rebuilds itself every season, it feels like. So we'll see what happens next year. It isn't like there isn't a chance. There isn't a reason for optimism with this team. It's just it was a lost opportunity, and we're still mourning that.
We're probably going to be mourning for the next few months, so bear with
us.
That is it for today's show. Thank you guys for tuning in. Tomorrow we're going to be back answering some more of your guys' Twitter questions. You sent us like 85 questions, and we only got to a handful of them on Tuesday, so we'll answer some more of those. Friday, we're going to have to figure out some stuff to do, whether it's some free agency stuff, some early draft stuff. We'll figure out some content for you guys. Don't worry. Just make sure you're downloading the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow Landon at McCool BCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher. We'll see you guys next time.